Hello, today I'd like to show you how I make a little pinwheel block. So this is the block that I'm going to show you, and it's just made from strips and squares, 2.5 inch wide strips and 2.5 inch squares. So I've got here, because I'm using an all one colour for my main colour, which happens to be white at this stage, I need to cut for each block, I need to cut 8 2.5 inch wide by 4.5 inch long pieces of fabric. So we'll get those cut. So I've got some 2.5 inch strips here of the white, and I'm using my board to help me with my measurements. So I've got it lined up on the end here, and I'm going to cut, I've got 4 layers of fabric, so I can cut 4 at a time, which always seems like a good idea to me. Probably don't want to cut too many more than 4 because things can distort, but I'm going to come along and cut 4.5 inches along and another one. So I've actually cut 8 pieces of material there, and that will be enough for one block. Now the blocks are going to measure 8.5 inches, so I've finished 8-inch block. And then for my little pinwheel, I just need some 2.5 inch squares. So I've got here 2 fabrics, I've layered them together, and I'm now going to cut some 2.5 inch squares for that. You need 4 2.5 inch squares for each block. So I'm actually just going to tidy up the end a little bit there. So starting from there, I'm going to just come along using my markings on my board, 2.5 inches, and because I need 4 for each block, I'm going to cut 4 lots out to there, and we're just going to make one block. I've got 2 lots of fabric here, and then we're actually going to, oops, here's my strips. We're going to place one on top of a background rectangle. Now the background didn't have to all be one colour. It can be similar colours. I suggest perhaps similar rather than all different, otherwise it can get a little bit confusing because you want the pinwheel to stand out. But I have got mine all just white this time. So I'm going to sew diagonally across this square, starting from this top left hand corner. So I just would need to draw a diagonal line just to make sure that I stay on track to do that. But I've actually got some here that I've already drawn, so these are the ones I'm going to sew. So I need to sew 4 of these so I can get all 4 ready, and then I'll go to the sewing machine and we'll stitch them. So I'm going to be stitching on that diagonal line from the top left hand corner down to the right. Now it's important that you sew them all in that same direction. If you sew some one way and some the other, the pinwheels simply won't work. So that's really just a good little thing to remember, that you need to keep them all the same. So I'll just go to the machine now and just quickly sew these. So I'm sewing actually right on that diagonal line that I've drawn. I'll put 4 of those through. So this makes a nice little quilt. I quite like the white background, it's nice and fresh. You could alternate these with something, you could border them with something, you could just put them together. Okay, so I've done my 4 little triangles on there, and now I'm going to trim those corners off. You want to make sure you trim the right bit off. You're just trimming the corner off, so just 1/4 inch away from your stitched line. And most rulers have a little 1/4 inch marker, which is really helpful. Just trim that triangle off. You don't need that triangle. If you had wanted to use it, you could actually do another row of sewing 1/2 inch away, and it would give you some really small half square triangle units. But I'm not going to do that today. And then I'm going to press these, and then we'll join them up with some other bits. Move those out of the way. Okay, now because I'm using the white as my main colour, I'm actually going to press the seam into the triangle. So I lay the white bit down first and then fold that triangle over, so that, because sometimes on white the seams show through, so where possible I try not to have them in a position where they will show through. Occasionally, you can't help it, on something like this block we're going to see some of the seams showing through a little bit, but I still try and avoid it where I can. Okay, so I should now have 4 little units like that, and I'm going to join those up. Remember, we cut 4 more of these strips, and we want that to go on that side, so the long side of the colour that you've put on goes next to the next background strip each time. So I'll get those all ready. Again, if you sew it on the other side, your pinwheel is not going to work. So again, just using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This fabric is so cute with these little bees on. It's the next stage done. It's great when you can chain piece. You could do several blocks at a time like this instead of just the one. Now again, because I'm using white, I'm going to have it so that most of the seam goes into the coloured bit that's there. So I'll lay the white down first and let that press over. I do like to press as I go. I find it makes my work come together so much better than if I don't. Now I've got those, so you could lay those out now so that you're going to get your pinwheels. You can see by turning the little unit each time, you're going to get a little pinwheel. Now of course you could play, you could do all sorts of things with these little units. You don't have to make pinwheels, but today we're making pinwheels. Okay, so now I'm going to join those two together, and in actual fact, if you were doing a whole lot of them, you can just join them in pairs like that, because that will actually turn around and it'll be absolutely the right way for you to make the block. So if you're doing a lot that you're chain piecing, so that you're keeping a similarity going, because when you chop and change is when you can sew the wrong bits together. So if you're doing several, I would suggest you do them all the same way up so that you kind of get into the swing of it. Now when you're doing this little bit here, there's no seam to match on that one with this one, so that's great, but this little point, you want to get these points to work quite nicely, so you can actually, because you pressed your seams in opposite directions as it turns out when you lay them right sides together, you can snuggle that in, that little seam, so that you'll end up with a nice point there. So we're coming down here. And the same thing, just snuggle those seams together that you can feel it usually. And again, back to the iron. Sometimes it seems a little bit tedious to keep going to the iron, but it really does make a big difference to how things go together. So I'm just going to press that over. And the same with this one. Again, if you do the pressing the same, when you turn this unit around to be the other half of your pinwheel, the seams are going in opposite directions now. So this bottom one's going that way and the top one's going that way. So again, I can nestle those together nicely. And you want them to nestle, because if you don't nestle the centre one, you won't have a nice point in your block. And so let's hope we've got one today. brilliant, but it's not too bad. So there's a nice little pinwheel block. So I've already made a couple of others so that you can get a bit of an idea how to do them. I've just chosen to use 2 different colours for my pinwheels, and you could just join them so that you get this nice spaced out background with just these occasional pinwheels, or you could choose to do something else with them, of course. But that's what I've been doing, and I have made a quilt previously and a pattern. I've got a pattern on my website, which is gourmetquilter.com. My patterns, you can purchase and download them from the website. And so I've made this one, it's called Pinwheels, and I've got the quilt there that I can show you as well. And so this one I haven't used the white, obviously. It's I've actually done some blocks with a green background and some with a blue background, but with these sort of yellowy colours. And I haven't used exactly the same fabric in each block. In the greens, there's actually probably 4 different fabrics going around that are all very similar, and the same in the blues. They're all very similar blues, but they're not all exactly the same, where I've used all just white in the ones I've just shown you. So that's another way of doing it, but again, because they're similar, they kind of read as much the same fabric, and then with the pinwheels against them, that really sets them off quite nicely, I think. So that was just another idea for another block that you can use using 2.5-inch strips and squares, and you finish with an 8.5-inch block. So it measures 8.5, so it'll be an 8-inch block when you sew it into something. Thank you.